Welcome to Biztech's C-Suite Conversation Show. Today we speak to Bertrand Saillet, Managing Director at FCM Travel Solutions Asia. Now, FCM is one of the largest global business travel management companies with a 24/7 worldwide reach in almost 100 countries. And it's the flagship business division of the ASX-listed Flight Centre Travel Group. Now, welcome to the show, Bertrand.
Hi, Brian. Nice to see you, and thanks for having me.
Now, for a start, could you give us an overview of the Flight Centre Travel Group, its history, and more specifically then FCM Travel Solutions?
Well, Flight Centre Travel Group is an Australian company that was created in the 80s by our founder, who is still actually the CEO of the company. His name is Screw Graham Turner. He's quite a celebrity in Australia. And it all started, back in the UK, to be fair, it started with he booked a few double-decker buses and he went for tours around Europe with young students or whatever. And it was very fun at the time. And when he came back to Australia, he opened his first travel shop. And that's how everything started. Now this is obviously a huge empire. Just before COVID, it was around $24 billion of business, around two big divisions, one around the leisure travel, and Flight Centre is obviously a very big leisure brand, particularly in Australia, but in other parts of the world. And then another division, which is around corporate travel, which FCM is part of, because we are the TMC of Flight Centre Travel Group in a nutshell. So it's been a very exciting story, actually, getting the company from where it started to where we are now, and it's quite fascinating.
So Bertrand, I gotta make a confession. I was a Flight Centre Travel customer in 1989.
Ooh.
When I was studying in Australia, so very long time. So I understand the business and I've seen its growth over the decades. But today, for your business itself, FCM Travel Solutions, which are the key markets and who are your key customers in Asia?
So we own our business in 24 countries around the world. So that's when we actually own the operations and all that. And we are represented by partners in around 100 countries, as you said earlier. If you look particularly at Asia, we own our business in China, Hong Kong, Malaysia, Singapore, and India. And we just announced last week an acquisition in Japan, which is going to become our new market in the region. And obviously we are extremely big in Australia and New Zealand, but I think we have an amazing coverage around the region when it comes to market presence, obviously. And other than that, USA has been our fastest growing market over the past 5 years, as well as Europe. We started in Europe from the UK, and now we are getting into continental Europe with acquisitions in France, Germany, and the Nordics, Sweden and Denmark and countries like that. So it's usually, we are very much where our corporate travelers are, because, those are the main hubs for corporate travel, obviously. So yeah, that's the ambition.
Now, Bertrand, you joined the business in 2015, but the business has changed significantly since the pandemic hit us. But to set the stage, tell us about how the business looked like pre-pandemic.
Yeah, so it's a good question. So first of all, I joined the business in 2015 because the business was already changing, and they needed kind of new blood to kind of lead the company through transformation. And transformation would include a lot of digitalization and much more IT savviness, should I say. So this is why I joined, because I thought it was a very interesting challenge. And obviously, we went through a lot of this transformation. And then in 2020, COVID hit, and this is some sort of a reboot of the entire strategy and structuring. And basically, the business now is not that different to what it was in 2020, except that we have less people, and we've done a lot of things during the whole crisis time to get to where we are now. But overall, we are quite happy with what we've done over the past 18 months or so. And I'm sure we are going to talk about that in more details, but it was an accelerated transformation to a large extent to get to a leaner structure, much more efficient, while growing our customer base, which is obviously the ambition of most companies those days to survive.
Absolutely. But can you give us a sense of how much was the business impacted financially? Could you share some numbers with us?
So I can, because, so first of all, we are a listed company, as you said earlier. We are listed at the ASX in Australia under FLT, which is our, code. We've basically announced our full year results 2 weeks ago. So we've posted a loss, obviously, over the past financial year. I think what is very important, and I think, we were quite blessed with that. When all of this started, very early in the process, in April 2020, we went back to our investors and we told them, listen, we are going through very difficult times. We think that this is not going to be a short thing. This is going to be quite a long crisis, and we need your support. And we got the support from the market. We actually managed to get 1.2 billion of fresh cash to survive. Obviously, the trade-off was that we had to make massive savings to make sure that we were not burning the cash and wasting it for no reason. And this is why we had to make drastic decisions. And I think we made it public, so I can share that with you. But before COVID, we used to have 22,000 people globally. And now we are probably more around 7,000, 8,000, which is obviously a massive staff reduction. And as you might appreciate, because of our business model, HR cost is by far the highest cost that we have in the company. So that's what we reduced the most. Luckily, in Asia, we had to make much lesser reduction for many reasons. One is because China, recovered much faster than most markets globally. And I don't know if you are familiar with China, but back in June 2020, the business was actually getting back already from a domestic standpoint.
That's right.
And the other reason is because we also used some markets in Asia, and Malaysia is one of them, to outsource some of our global jobs and make sure that we were benefiting from, let's say, a less costly labor market and things like that. So that's why we implemented a lot of new global disciplines in Malaysia, and that was very good for us because we didn't have to reduce our staffing that much in the Asian markets. And obviously now we are very much ready for the rebound. So yeah, that's all what happened over the past 18 months.
So that's interesting. So what you did was and from a business, and literally this was like a business turnaround, literally to pivot, right? So you went to about 1/3 of your size, and also even within that size, your cost base was even lower because you shifted some of those roles to a cost base like Malaysia, which is a very low cost base. Is that a shared services hub in Malaysia?
Yes, you can call it like that, in KL.
And what sort of size is that?
We have around probably 80 people now in Malaysia. It's not like one of those massive, offices and all of that, but it's a significant presence.
Okay. Now, in the travel tech space, obviously, innovation and digitization has been on steroids over the last 18 months. Could you share some of the digitization projects that you basically implemented as part of your turnaround strategy, and what sort of results have you got out of it?
Excellent. So one thing I can tell you is that as part of the money we got from our investors, they told us reduce your cost, but they also said we want to make sure that you are investing our money in the things that will get the best return for us as investors after COVID. So the first one was obviously technology. So we built this project or concept, should I say, called Grow to Win. And we decided to invest some money in key areas of the business that would help us bring our brand, reputation, and offering for our customers to become much more relevant to them and make sure that we were gaining market share and showing more value to investors again. So in terms of technology, this was all about digitalization of the travel ecosystem. again, FCM is helping company to travel better. So that means helping company to save money on travel, but also making sure that everyone within the company knows what's the travel policy, how to get the best deals from different vendors, being airlines and hotels and things like that, but also bringing a lot of digitalization. And more, this is about optimizing workflows within company. You know, travel demand is usually quite cumbersome. You need to call someone, will come back with a quote, then you need to go to your manager with an email or something to ask for approval, and then coming back and all. So we found a way to optimize all of this and have a fully automated workflow that starts from demand management. So the moments you need to go on a trip to when you come back, and connection with expense management and things like that, to have, you know, all the invoices and all of that processed in a very efficient manner. So the time you save along the way is very substantial, and it allows you to be much more efficient in your company dealing with your travel management while keeping a great control on your cost and obviously the people traveling. So that was one layer. The other layer is obviously all about information. I mean, you know, Brian, you are sitting in Malaysia, obviously, and as you know, each time you even think of going somewhere, the first question is, can I go? If I can go, what are the different rules and regulations along the way? And we wanted to bring to our customer base a very advanced set of technology that could allow them to understand better that were the restrictions, depending on your nationality, your vaccination status. I mean, all of this is part of the equation those days. And on top of that, it's fair to say that the rules are changing almost on a daily basis. I mean, you know, depending on where you're going, there is always something coming up, could be linked to an airline, a connecting point, the country of origin. All of this brings a lot of complexity, which makes our business as a travel management company even more exciting, because it's an opportunity for us to show a lot of value to our customers along the way.
And it's interesting because, Bertrand, from what you've just described, there is also another benefit of you becoming much more efficient and optimizing. It's greater customer intimacy, because essentially when you deploy your solutions there, your customers have more transparency across the workflow, and they're not going to switch out from you if they're doing a good job.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, building loyalty with our customer base is a huge area of focus of us. And we are proud to say that during the COVID time, we haven't lost customers. Like, I think our retention rate last year was 99%, which is absolutely amazing. And I think our customers were recognizing that we were going through difficult times, but that we kept a business very much running and coming up with innovative solutions that were helping them to do what they need to do with travel, you know what I mean? And to make sure that they had a partner that they could trust and rely on to do the job that they were not meant to do, you know what I mean? Yes. And I think, yeah, you're right. I mean, we are very proud of that, I believe. And so what you are saying is that we are building stickiness with our customer base, and I position it more in the sense that we want to be seen as bringing value to our customers. And if we bring value, usually customers don't leave because they understand why they are working with you, I guess.
Now, Bertrand, I want to zoom in on the aviation sector, because you worked in Airbus before. Yeah. Private jet usage has soared among businesses and high net worth individuals globally. What's demand like been in Asia, and how have you been able to tap into that as a group?
So this is an excellent question. So I'm not going to go into the macroeconomics of the aviation sector, which is very complicated in itself. But as you know, if you look at the big manufacturers, both Airbus and Boeing, none of them collapsed, despite that at the beginning, everybody was like, oh my God, it's going to be. But in the end, I mean, it's just about adaptation. When it comes to charter flights, so first of all, we as a company, we have a charter flights subsidiary, which is called Aviation in Australia. And the reason why we actually bought this company a while ago was originally because of the mining industry. And as you know, because they operate mines in very remote areas and stuff, sometimes they need to have private planes and charters to move their people around. So with the pandemic, we've seen a much higher demand in terms of charter flights. And to answer your question, I know it's a long answer, but there is two big segments. One, those are corporate customers that need to move their people to, could be like a plant, could be a mine, could be, for example, the seamen and all of that, that you need to move across the planet. And when there is no flights available, you need to find ways to make that happen. So usually what we do in this kind of circumstance is going to large airlines. In Singapore, it could be Singapore Airlines, it could be a Scoot or something, and say, I want your aircraft that you are going to operate, but I'm going to take care of the management of the charter. So that's one area. And usually we use basically the same aircraft that you would see in civil aviation. And the second segment was more like private charter, which were more for wealthy families that needed to travel. And at the time where you couldn't find any, civil, aviation flights or something, that was the best way to travel. And we've seen very high demand of those family charter flights, which are usually, aircraft between, let's say, 4 to 20 seaters. So that would be the average size. So for example, one big wave that we've seen of demand was in India during the past, or the last, should I say, wave of COVID, which, as you know, has been quite dramatic and very much seen in the media. But a lot of people tried to fly out of the country before things got too bad. And the demand in charter flights, particularly to countries like Dubai and all of that, has been absolutely huge. And they were all those kind of family type charters, 4 to 20 seaters, just to move the family across.
Now, how does the current corporate business landscape look like globally and within Asia? Because in Europe and US, they've already started opening up over the summer. What do you see happening in Asia as we start to open up? And governments also realize that it's an endemic. We've got to come to live with this. Even Australia is starting to change its mind in terms of how they view living with the endemic.
Exactly. So if you look at the three continents, Asia Pacific has been the most conservative, with more country going for a zero COVID kind of attitude. So if you look at New Zealand, Australia, China, Japan now, which is like, in this, crisis management mode, most countries have gone for zero COVID strategy. And that is obviously quite an issue for travel, because travel is always seen as a factor for COVID increase. So controlling border is seen as the first kind of shelter to avoid COVID to come in. So that's a problem when you are in corporate travel. The USA, or America, should I say, and Europe have had a complete different approach toward COVID. So they were obviously much more open. Europe, with the Schengen area, has reopened like back in May this year, I think. So people could travel, in any country within the continent without any issue. And I think they accelerated vaccination massively, and that was for them a bit of vaccination plus some sort of safety. France, for example, launched what they call the pass sanitaire, which is a bit like what you would call trace together in Singapore. It's kind of a similar concept where, if you want to go to a restaurant or thing, you need to show that you are either vaccinated or a negative PCR test. So all those things have improved the confidence within the continent, and then they let kind of things go. And from what we see, it's going quite okay. I mean, yes, there is a few waves here and there, but overall it's quite controlled. So when it comes to corporate travel, big boost in Americas, big boost in Europe, and in Asia, it's still today very much about domestic travel. So China was the engine of domestic travel across the region because it's obviously a big, large domestic market. And what we've seen in China is that our volume of domestic business is higher than what it was pre-COVID. The other big market was actually Australia, which did pretty well for a very long time until the past 2 months, which has been a bit of a catastrophe in the country, because now they are closing, within Australia borders between the different states, and it's becoming very difficult to travel domestically in Australia now. For the rest, I think everybody's watching. Borders are still very much closed around the continent. Hong Kong, that went from a 21 days to 7 days quarantine, is now back to 21 days. Singapore is starting some different initiatives. So the most exciting one is the one toward Germany and Brunei. I don't know if you're familiar with that, but they are opening what they call a VTL, for vaccinated travel lane. So if you travel on certain particular flights and you are fully vaccinated, you can enjoy coming back to Singapore without having to do a quarantine. The requirement is that you do a test before departure, a test at arrival, and then a test at day 3 and day 7. And if all the tests are negative, you are free to do whatever you want when you arrive in Singapore. And the great news as well is that this VTL is open to not only residents of Singapore, but potential tourists or business travelers that want to come to Singapore for any reason. So this is the first time we see that level of openness for one particular segment of customer within Singapore. And it's great news, because we hope that if things are successful, then it will give to other countries the confidence that they could reopen with a certain level of control. And that's obviously great news for us as a business. One thing I can tell you is that they opened this VTL, I think 3 weeks ago, and we've seen a massive peak of tickets for Germany, which is very interesting, because it means that as soon as you open a route, people just buy tickets for it. So it means the confidence is not, bad. It's just that people need to know that they are going to be able to travel safely and come back home, which, as you know, has been a problem in the past. So it's rebuilding confidence, basically.
And so, as part of this, do you see that in terms of demand expectation, there is a huge expectation, whether from a financial sector or from the industry itself, that there's going to be a huge element of revenge travel spending? Do you think that's going to extend to the corporate space as well? And is that a trend that you see moving forward?
Yeah, I definitely think like we have a lot of German-based customers in Singapore. So as a consequence, when these things happen, they want to jump on the first plane and get there. And the same thing happened for Hong Kong. You remember when Singapore and Hong Kong were trying to build this travel bubble that never really happened. But each time, the bubble was happening, each time the level of booking was going very high. And actually, it was very difficult to find a seat in the first month post the opening, because all flights were full. So yes, there is definitely a need. There is definitely a desire. And then, like always, you will see a peak at the beginning, and after a while it will regulate, because it will be about, why do you need to travel? Where do you need to go? And, corporate travel is also very much about budget control, risk control. So all of those things have a factor when it comes to buying travel, obviously. But we definitely see each time we open a new route and there is some opportunity for people to travel safely without too much restrictions, we always see a great pickup, that's for sure.
But Bertrand, one of the things that is very untested at the moment is the fact that people are so used to now doing business online and doing business on Zoom that business travel will actually fall and will not reach pre-COVID levels. Is that a view that you share?
Absolutely. I have to say yes, for multiple reasons. So you say usage of Zoom, Teams, and all that, which are definitely bringing another level of collaboration within companies. and this is here to stay. I mean, that's very obvious. We are talking on Zoom right now. I mean, in another circumstance, I would probably have flown to KL to see you, or you coming to Singapore, you know what I mean? So that makes a lot of things easier and possible. The other thing is a lot of companies are focusing on sustainability, and sustainability, you know, obviously travel has an impact on CO2 emission. And so companies are looking at finding the right balance. Now, that being said, I do believe that corporate travel is here to stay. In market like China, as I told you earlier, we've seen, you know, us coming back to the pre-COVID level pretty fast, actually, because there is one reason behind this, is that we do corporate travel for a reason. You are to meet customers, you are to work on projects which move much faster when you can see people. And a lot of industries, you know, are still very dependent on corporate travel. That's just a fact. Like if you, as I said before, if you are in the marine industry, you need to move your people to go on ships, and that's just a reality of the industry. If you have people and engineers moving to plants, or architects and things like that, you need to get them moving around. Lawyers need to see their customers. And we all know that not all conversations can happen online or even on the phone. You know, there is a level of confidentiality and all of that that you cannot reach, and you know, unless you see people face to face. So those things are going to remain. So it might not be the same level as before, depending on the industries. Our bet was, let's grow our market share so far so that we are not impacted, because at the end of the day, if the business comes back, we have grown our market share. Even if our customers individually travel less, we won't have the same impact overall, because we have grown our market share. So it's compensated by the new customers that are coming on board. So that's very much the vision we have. So yeah, I don't know, it was a long answer, but in short, yes, it will have an impact. But corporate travel is here to stay, and it's a very important part of doing business, particularly in this region. That's for sure.
What's the growth strategy for FCM Travel Solutions Asia in the next 24 months?
The first thing is, as I mentioned earlier, we just announced an acquisition in Japan. So we want to obviously make this acquisition successful, which means implementing all our suite and technology and all of that in Japan, which is a fascinating market, and start growing in the market. It has a huge opportunity. Japan is the 4th largest corporate travel business market in the world. So big opportunity for us. The second thing is consolidating our positioning in China. We just invested in a new system in China to build a system which is much more connected to the local ecosystem. And we are implementing or deploying this system as we speak. And this is going to be, again, a huge area of focus for the next 2 years. And for the rest is really looking at the opportunities and really nurturing the relationship with our customers to make sure that we are here for them when travel is back, and that we can take them through the complexity of travel and help them save money and a lot of troubles along the way. So that's what we want to do in the rest of the region for sure.
Now, I want to take a different tack and ask you, Bertrand, how has managing a business that's been decimated by the pandemic and having to then quickly respond, change strategies and stuff, shaped you as a leader?
Wow, that's a $1 million question. You know what? I have to be very honest here. And I think as a leader, sometimes we need to show a bit of vulnerability. And I think it was a time where it was okay to say, you know what, it's very hard. And even for me as a leader in this very complex region, having to make so many decisions which were very hard, it was all about accepting that, you know, you can have your up and downs and you can say that to your people. But all the time, my view is do things with honesty, integrity, and transparency. When you explain to people the reason why you are doing very difficult things, people understand. And that was, to me, the absolute, thing for me. It was like really coming back to my values and making sure that I was not doing anything which would go against my values by doing things with honesty, integrity, and transparency. And that was the big thing. So yeah, it was hard, let's face it. But I'm lucky to work for a company which has a huge focus on people as well. So we are not only looking at numbers and things, it's also about the people in the business, because we believe that that's what makes the company the exciting company that it is today. I said earlier that we still have our founder as a CEO, and that was, I think, a big point of difference as well, because the first thing that Screw, our founder, did when all of this happened was to get all our global MDs together and starting to think and saying, what do we do? And from that moment, we had one call every single day for 3 months, including weekends, to work on all of this together. And the teamwork, having our founder, like, he's 72 years old, I think, this year, and having him, leading this ship, with all of us behind him and all of that, was a massive winning factor, I think. And this is probably why we could go through this. So I would say so strongly, if it's the word I'd choose, because I think the position we are in right now is actually quite pretty strong compared to most of our competitors, and it's because we made the right decisions at the right time in the right way.
Now, Bertrand, it's been a fascinating conversation. Thank you very much for taking your time to be on the show.
My pleasure. It was really a pleasure having this conversation with you, and I hope I will meet you at some point when travel reopen.
Thank you very much. Likewise. I'm Brian Fernandez, and I've been speaking to Bertrand Saillet, the Managing Director of FCM Travel Solutions Asia, on Biztech's C-Suite Conversation Show. This video will be on our Facebook and LinkedIn sites, as well as our website, www.biztech.asia. Please subscribe and like our various platforms. Thank you very much for tuning in.